This case is about an 8-year-old that is spanked by her 52-year-old parents. For example, when she touches the hot stove, the parents spank the 8-year-old to teach her a lesson in goals of preventing this behavior in the future. This grows concern with other parents, making it an ethical dilemma. We think that it is not ethical for Emmett and Ivy to spank their daughter. We think this because the justification is invalid. Long-term psychological effects. Hitting your child is unethical. Max, get on to the first point. The justification is invalid.
So the justification is invalid. According to the article, their justification was A, because there's a large age gap, and B, because they weren't spanking with malicious intent. And so these are politically incorrect and outdated justifications. So while they weren't punishing with malicious intent per se, they were punishing with the intent to reinforce better behavior. But it doesn't teach the kids anything and doesn't teach them better behavior. Punishment should, in theory, teach kids what and why not to do certain things. Instead, spanking just creates fear. You should learn why not touch the hot stove. Don't touch the hot stove, but instead it just creates fear of touching the hot stove and fear of the parents. And I wouldn't agree that with the statement that instilling fear in children is not malicious behavior.
So moving on to our second point, I think it allows for long-term psychological effects, which make it super unethical. As long as these long-term problems, there may be some problems that come after it. And meaning overall, spanking is ineffective. Although spanking and hitting their child may solve the problem in the short term, meaning they won't do it again the second time, the long-term psychological problems are vast and are super bad and important to look out for, such as distress, trauma, PTSD, and creates fear. It overall creates a slippery slope to other problems, meaning that although it creates a solution to the problem in the short term, it will create long problems, which will develop into longer problems, which will develop into super bad impacts on people like PTSD or fear of their parents or trauma or distress, which will haunt them for the rest of their lives. It aims to create negative reinforcement, meaning a fear of doing a bad thing or bad behavior, such as touching the stove. But I think the means of doing so, which is hitting your children, is unethical.
So the third point is hitting your children is unethical. So hitting your children is just unethical because it affects the child's health, like mentally and physically. And also, like, if you hit your child without explaining, like, what, or like, if you just hit your child and like you don't explain like anything, like what they did wrong, it doesn't really help them, because it's like you building something brand new without a user's manual, and you really can't like, get it done if you don't know how to like build it. Okay, so the third point was also hitting a child will also leave a mark on them, since it might lead to like them doing it to their kids when they grow up. And also, like, if they have a relationship when they grow up, they might just accept the abuse from their partner because it's like, oh, since my parents hit me, they might think that it's like fine for them for their like partner to hit them, and that might like lead to a abusive relationship.
Very good.
On the other hand, the case is not justifying the spanking because the parents are older. They're justifying the spanking because she did something wrong. In addition, fear of bad behavior will cause a person not to do something in the future, which would technically make this punishment effective.
So just to wrap everything up, in terms of the ethicality of the case, it is not ethical to spank your children, no matter the circumstances, as shown as that the justification is invalid, the psychological effects outweigh, and that hitting your children is just generally unethical and might leave a mark, and it might have a greater impact on their children in the future. Thank you.
Can I get a goodbye from everybody? Goodbye.
Goodbye.
There we go.